They said she would never rise. They said her voice did not matter. They said her dreams were too big for a girl born in the shadows of poverty and pain. But what happens when a spirit refuses to break? What happens when a heart that has been crushed again and again chooses to fight back one more time? Her story is not written in gold but in scars, in nights of hunger, and in days of rejection. The world tried to silence her, yet every no became fuel for her fire. She carried wounds deeper than most could bear, but inside her lived a storm that no one could stop. This is not a fairy tale. This is a journey of blood, sweat, and tears. Against all odds, she turned her silence into power and her pain into purpose. And today, her story inspires millions. Her name was whispered in corners where no one believed she would survive. Born into a world that judged her before she could even walk, she carried labels she never asked for. Every street she walked held shadows of doubt, and every face around her seemed to say she would never be enough. Yet inside her burned a quiet strength, a voice that refused to die. Life tested her in the harshest ways. Empty plates on the table, doors slammed in her face, dreams torn apart by cruel hands. Still, she kept walking, kept believing, kept fighting. She was not supposed to rise, but destiny had other plans. What began as a story of struggle would soon transform into a journey of power. This is the untold black story that continues to inspire millions, because sometimes the strongest voices come from the most broken places. From the very beginning, her world was painted with struggle. She was born in a small neighborhood where dreams were often buried before they could grow. Her family had little, and nights often ended with empty plates on the table. She wore the same shoes until they tore apart, and even then she walked with her head high, hiding the pain in her feet but never letting her spirit bend. At school, she faced whispers and cruel stares. Teachers doubted her, classmates mocked her, and society had already written her future in a language of failure. But she carried a secret strength. Each insult carved fire inside her, and each rejection taught her to stand taller. There were days when she cried silently, pressing her pillow against her face so no one could hear. Yet those tears watered the roots of a determination that only grew stronger. Poverty was not her only battle. Racism walked beside her like a shadow, always reminding her she was unwanted in spaces she dared to step into. She would raise her hand in class only to be ignored, while others were praised for less. She watched opportunities pass her by simply because of the color of her skin. It hurt, but instead of letting the pain destroy her, she turned it into quiet fuel. She started to believe that every no was not an end but a test. She would go home, open borrowed books, and study until her eyes burned. Her world outside told her she was less, but inside she knew she was more. Every morning she promised herself she would break free, even if the whole world stood against her. The road ahead was dark, but deep within her heart, a light refused to go out. She was only a young girl with nothing in her hands, yet she carried a vision bigger than the walls built around her. And though no one else could see it, she believed that one day her story would not be defined by her struggles, but by the strength that grew from them. As she grew older, the walls around her only seemed to rise higher. At school, her questions were ignored, her ideas dismissed, and her achievements overlooked. When she raised her hand to share an answer, the teacher called on someone else. When she worked twice as hard, her success was credited to luck, while others were celebrated for doing less. The message was clear: this world was not built for her. At times, she felt invisible, as if her existence did not carry the same worth as those around her. She walked into stores where eyes followed her like she was guilty of something she had not done. She applied for jobs where her resume was strong, yet the doors slammed shut before she even reached the interview. She heard phrases like, "You don't belong here," whispered behind her back, and sometimes shouted straight to her face. Every day became a battle, not just to prove she was capable, but to prove she deserved the right to stand where she stood. The weight of rejection pressed heavy on her shoulders, but she refused to let it bury her spirit. At night, when the world grew silent, she replayed every harsh word, every closed door, and every hateful stare. Those memories cut deep, yet within the pain, she found a strange kind of strength. She realized the system was designed to break her, to silence her, to keep her in a place of fear. But instead of giving in, she began to see each rejection as another reason to fight harder. She told herself that one day her name would be remembered not for the battles she lost, but for the wars she refused to surrender. Still, the loneliness was real. She had few allies, and often felt like she was walking a road no one else could understand. Society did not just challenge her, it tested every piece of her identity, trying to convince her she was less than human. But in her silence, she made a promise to herself. No matter how many doors closed, no matter how many voices rose against her, she would keep pushing forward. The world might not want her, but she was determined to carve her place in it. There came a night when her strength felt like it had finally run out. She had faced rejection after rejection, and each one had left a scar she could no longer hide. She had studied until her eyes burned, worked until her body ached, and still the world seemed blind to her effort. That night, she sat alone in her small room, staring at the ceiling, asking herself if it was worth it. The voices of doubt grew louder than her own heartbeat. "Maybe they are right," she whispered. "Maybe I do not belong anywhere." The walls felt like they were closing in, and the weight on her chest made it hard to breathe. For the first time, she thought about giving up, not just on her dreams, but on herself. She imagined a life where she simply stopped fighting, where she faded into silence and allowed the world to win. Tears fell heavy on her face, soaking the pillow that had carried so many of her cries before. The breaking point had come, and it was cruel. She felt powerless, as though every ounce of fight had been drained from her soul. Yet even in that darkness, something strange happened. A memory flickered in her mind, her mother's words telling her that storms do not last forever. She heard her younger self promising she would rise, no matter what. The contrast between who she was and who she wanted to be filled her heart with a painful fire. At that moment, she realized she was standing at a crossroad. One path led to surrender, the other to resilience. The choice was hers, but the weight of it nearly crushed her. This was not just another setback. This was the moment that would decide whether her story ended in silence or exploded into history. Just when she thought her journey was over, life placed a spark in her path. It was not a miracle or a sudden success, but a simple moment that carried the power to shift everything. One afternoon, after another long day of disappointment, she met a woman at the community center who listened to her story without judgment. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen. The woman looked into her tired eyes and said, "You are stronger than you know. Do not let them decide who you are." Those words pierced through the darkness that had been choking her spirit. That night, she replayed the conversation again and again, clinging to every syllable like it was a lifeline. She began to realize that maybe her pain was not meant to break her but to prepare her for something greater. The spark grew stronger when she stumbled upon an old notebook filled with dreams she had written as a child. On the first page, in her small handwriting, were the words, "I will rise." Reading those words, written by her younger self, sent chills down her spine. She remembered the little girl who believed anything was possible, the little girl who had not yet been silenced by the world. That memory lit a fire inside her. She started waking up earlier, dedicating hours to learning new skills, pushing her mind and body beyond limits. Every failure still hurt, but now each one felt like another step toward her destiny. The spark of hope did not erase the challenges, but it reminded her why she could not quit. She began to walk with a different energy, carrying herself with quiet strength that even her enemies noticed. Deep down, she knew storms would come again, but she also knew she had the power to survive them. What had seemed like the end was only the beginning of a new chapter. The spark had turned into a flame, and she was ready to rise. The spark that once flickered inside her soon grew into an unstoppable flame. She began to rise with a determination no obstacle could crush. Each morning, she woke before the sun, training her mind and body to push past every limit. The girl who had once been ignored now carried herself with a confidence that demanded attention. She studied harder than ever, mastering subjects that once felt impossible, refusing to let failure define her path. At work, she volunteered for the hardest tasks, proving her worth through action even when no one believed in her. The same people who once doubted her began to notice the shift. She was no longer the quiet girl hiding in the shadows. She was a fighter who walked with purpose. Every rejection she had faced turned into fuel, and every painful memory became a weapon she carried against doubt. She did not move in anger but in strength, reminding herself that her journey was not about revenge but about proving that she belonged. Yet rising was never easy. She still faced closed doors, harsh words, and people who wanted her to fail. But this time, she refused to break. Each challenge became a test she was determined to pass. When others slept, she worked. When others laughed at her, she turned their laughter into motivation. She pushed herself until her body ached and her mind burned with exhaustion. Yet she smiled, knowing every step was taking her closer to the life she had always dreamed of. Slowly, her small victories began to build. A scholarship was won, an award was earned, a voice was finally heard. None of it came easy, but each achievement carried the weight of her entire past. She realized that her story was no longer about survival, it was about transformation. She had risen from the ashes of rejection, and with every new step, she was proving that nothing could stop her. The rise was not just about her success but about sending a message to every soul who had ever been told they were not enough. She was living proof that even against all odds, greatness was possible. Her rise had not gone unnoticed, and with recognition came new battles. The world that had once ignored her now watched closely, some with admiration, others with suspicion. Doors that had been shut for years opened, but they were filled with rules meant to test her at every turn. She faced discrimination not just in whispers, but in blatant challenges meant to push her down. Colleagues doubted her abilities, competitors tried to undermine her, and authority figures questioned her every move. Yet she refused to bend. Every unfair rule became a reason to fight harder, every insult a reminder that she was stronger than their prejudice. She learned to navigate systems designed to break her spirit, turning obstacles into opportunities to prove herself. She spoke up when others stayed silent, not out of anger but out of necessity. Each stand she took carried risk, but she knew that remaining quiet would betray everything she had survived. Her courage inspired those around her, showing that strength was not measured by comfort but by resilience in the face of adversity. She challenged policies, spoke at meetings, and demanded recognition for work often stolen from people like her. Some days were exhausting, filled with setbacks that felt impossible to overcome. Yet she pressed on, guided by a vision larger than herself. She realized that her fight was not just for her own success, but for those who would follow in her footsteps. Every barrier she broke created a path for others. She was no longer just surviving, she was changing the system itself. The battles were endless, but so was her resolve. Even when surrounded by those who wanted her to fail, she found allies in unexpected places, and each small victory fueled her spirit. Her journey proved that courage is contagious, and one person's refusal to accept injustice can ignite change that touches countless lives. Fighting the system was not easy, but it was necessary, and she was determined to see it through. After years of struggle, her moment finally arrived. It was not sudden, but it felt like the world had shifted in her favor. Every sleepless night, every tear, every battle had led her to this point. She received the call she had been waiting for, a scholarship to a prestigious program, recognition for work she had poured her soul into, and an opportunity to make a real difference. The weight of past failures seemed to lift as she held the acceptance letter in her hands. She remembered the little girl who had once cried alone in her room, doubting if she could ever belong anywhere. That little girl would have never imagined this. She had fought against poverty, discrimination, and countless closed doors, and now the doors that mattered most swung wide open. Her breakthrough was not just personal, it symbolized victory over every obstacle that had tried to hold her down. Friends and mentors celebrated with her, but she knew the real celebration was silent, inside her heart, where perseverance had been tested and proven. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, to feel the joy that came from knowing her struggle had a purpose. But she did not stop there. She used this opportunity to work harder, to learn faster, to inspire others by example. The breakthrough became a launchpad, not a destination. Every step she had taken, every scar she had earned, fueled her determination to rise even higher. Her story was no longer hidden in shadows. It was visible, powerful, and undeniable. She had become proof that courage, resilience, and unwavering belief could turn even the harshest past into a future full of possibility. The breakthrough was her moment of triumph, a reminder that against all odds, success was possible. Her journey did not stop with her own success. The story of her struggle, courage, and ultimate triumph began to spread, touching hearts across cities, countries, and continents. People who had faced similar obstacles saw themselves in her journey and drew strength from her example. Messages poured in from those who felt unseen, unheard, or overlooked, thanking her for proving that survival was only the beginning. She spoke at schools, community centers, and conferences, sharing not just her achievements but the lessons she had learned along the way. Her voice carried power because it was rooted in truth, in pain, and in victory over adversity. Social media amplified her story, and soon millions were inspired by a girl who had refused to be silenced. Her influence grew beyond her expectations, reaching those she had never met but who needed her story to believe in themselves. She became a symbol of hope, a living proof that determination and courage could overcome the harshest barriers. Every speech, every post, every interview was infused with authenticity, and people listened because they knew it was real. She inspired not only individuals but movements, showing that one person's persistence could create waves of change. From the young student doubting herself in a classroom to adults questioning their place in the world, countless lives felt the power of her example. She had transformed pain into purpose, struggle into triumph, and silence into a voice that echoed globally. Against all odds, she became more than successful. She became a beacon of hope, proving that one life, lived with courage and resilience, could inspire millions to rise above their own challenges and chase their dreams relentlessly. Her journey began in shadows, filled with doubt, pain, and endless struggle, yet it ended in light, courage, and triumph. Every tear she shed, every door slammed in her face, every moment of despair had shaped her into the woman she became, strong, unyielding, and unstoppable. She had not just risen for herself, she had risen for every soul who had been told they were not enough. Her story proved that adversity could be transformed into power, silence into voice, and suffering into inspiration. Today, her life stands as a testament to resilience, reminding us that the fiercest battles often produce the brightest victories. Against all odds, she carved her place in the world, leaving a legacy that will continue to inspire millions. And as her story echoes through hearts everywhere, one truth remains undeniable: courage, hope, and determination can turn the impossible into reality.